Hello everybody, it's Michael here from My Retirement Trading, and today we are going to reveal my number one holding. But before we get into this, I must state that this is not financial advice or recommendation, and it is for entertainment purposes only. Well, before I reveal this little backstory here, well, my story begins, it's in the early 90s, and a company I was with offered a 401k. And my father always told me that you should get into a 401k if they offer it. And I went down there and I signed up. And I believe at the time I was putting like 20 bucks a week in it. And I asked them at the time, I said, they had a list of funds to choose from. And I said, what do you recommend? And they said, well, we really can't, tell you that, but here's a list of them. So I go through this list and I'm reading them and I see one that says balanced. And I look at it and it's the word balance. So I figured, it's balanced. So I go over there and I asked them, will this one work? And they said, oh yeah. So I chose this balance fund, and that's where my journey began. Well, over time, I did put more money than the $20 in there and per week, and the company didn't match that I was with at the time. And so I started this journey, planning to be, retired one day. And, years went by, like over 20, and I really wasn't getting where I thought I should be at the time. And I was talking to, other people I knew, and they seemed to be doing a lot better. And I'm like, man, I am doing something wrong here. So that's what led me on the journey to, figure out what I was doing wrong. Well, fast forward, it's around 2015, and I went over to this friend of mine's house named Bob. He was an older gentleman I knew, and he was an investor. And he was actually going to show me how to trade some options. Well, at his house, he had this book laying on the coffee table, and it was the Tony Robbins Money book. And I said, Tony Robbins? And he's got a book on money? And he said, oh yeah, man, it's a great book. You ought to read it. Well, I did read the book. And after reading the book, I was like devastated. I felt like it told me that everything I was doing for over 20 years of my life was wrong. And one key takeaway that I, got from it was index fund investing. So I started digging into index funds at this point. Well, on my journey to learn more about index fund investing, I found out that they say that over 90% of fund managers cannot beat the index. So I decided that maybe I should, purchase the index. Well, my company that I worked for at the time, they were switching 401k providers, and I tried to get my money at the time, and they said I couldn't. So I went down there with the new company, and I looked through their funds, and I found an S&P 500 index fund. And I put all my money in it at the time. And 5 years passed real quick, and my money had doubled. And I'm like, wow, I'm on the right track. So that's where my journey begins with the S&P 500 index fund investing. Well, eventually I left this job and I decided to roll all this money into an IRA. And I decided I needed to purchase an index fund, which led me, after doing some research, to my number one holding, the Vanguard VOO, the S&P 500 ETF by Vanguard, VOO. So that's my number one holding. Well, if you go to the Vanguard website and you look up VOO, VOO, the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, you go to the product summary, it says it invests in stocks in the S&P 500 index, representing 500 of the largest U.S. companies. The goal is to closely track the index return, which is considered a gauge of overall U.S. stock returns. And if you click on the composition and come down to the holdings, right now, NVIDIA is number one, coming in at 7.33%, followed by Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Meta, etc. So this is the fund that I chose, the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, VOO, VOO. Well, there are many different funds that are similar that track the S&P 500 index. But the main reason I chose this one is I was a Jack Bogle fan, and I decided to go with this one because he was the founder of Vanguard. No other reason than that. And that's the reason I chose this one. Well, the reason I like index funds like the S&P 500, and it's just my opinion, it's not financial advice or recommendation, is that it tracks 500 of some of the largest companies in the United States. So it tracks a lot of the winners. And for example, like at this time, I believe I looked it up, and it was stating like NVIDIA is 7% or maybe a little bit more than that of the index. So say if you have like $500,000 in the index and over 7% of it's NVIDIA, if I'm looking at it right, which I believe I am, that's over $35,000 in NVIDIA. So if it goes up 10 times in the next few years, or over the span of time, then that'll grow from 35,000 to 350,000. So that's got to really boost the performance of that fund. So that's the reason I like the S&P 500 index. And you can say the same thing with many other holdings they have in there. So that's one of the main reasons I love this index. Another reason I like the index funds is it avoids single stock risk. And from my experience, I'm not very good at picking individual stocks. So if I pick one and I'm wrong, it may never come back. But at least with the index fund, it's pretty diverse, and even if the market goes down, usually it'll come back over time if there's larger enough time horizon. So I like the diversity of the index fund for sure. And it's been very, very good to me so far. So that's another reason that I love the index funds. Well, another reason I like index funds, I was researching what the total return was in the last 10 years for the S&P 500. And I believe I read that it had an average of 12%. So I took the rule of 72, which is you take 72 and you divide it by the return you're receiving. And that comes up with the number of years that it takes to double your money. So 72 divided by 12 is about 6 years. So if I'm looking at it right, my money's going to double every 6 years on the average. So in 6 years from now, I should have double the money. And then 6 years from then, I should have double that money. And from my experience so far, it's been working out something similar to that. So that's another reason that I love index fund investing. Well, in conclusion of this video here, we've revealed my number one holding, the Vanguard S&P 500 Index ETF VOO, VOO. And that is my number one holding. It's not advice or a recommendation. It's just what I'm doing or have done. And it's been very good to me so far. And I plan on holding it for many more years. And we discussed how I like that it's broad-based and it performs very well and it avoids single stock risk. So that's why I chose this holding. And on that note, I appreciate y'all watching this video. And if you have any comments, drop them in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. And on that note, until next time, I will catch you all later.